The managing director of the IMF, Christine Lagarde, has finally tendered in her resignation as boss of the fund. In a letter posted on her social media page, the former IMF boss said this is to allow her work on nomination as president of the European Central Bank. The registration, or the resignation rather, would, however, take effect from September 12 this year. She, however, promised to stay off any communication relating to the IMF during the period. The current deputy managing director of the IMF, David Lipton, would take over in acting capacity as the executive board begins search for a new boss. Christine Lagarde was appointed as managing director of the IMF in June 2011, replacing Dominique Strauss-Kahn. Now, tonight, economist Professor Godfrey Bokwe is kicking against proposals for some drastic expenditure cuts in the mid-year review and supplementary budget. My colleague George Afe has been engaging the economist and has the rest of the story.
Finance Minister Ken Ofori-Atta is now expected to review the 2019 budget estimates and present a supplementary budget to Parliament on July 24. This is coming after the initial July 17 date was reviewed. According to the Public Financial Administration Act, the mid-year review should be presented before July 31 every year. There are calls that the finance minister should use the presentation to rather cut down on its expenditure if it's really committed to controlling the rising debts. But speaking to Joy Business, economist Professor Godfrey Bokwe argues that the time might not be right for any drastic expenditure cuts.
There are certain expenditures you cannot cut. The level of expenditure rigidity is such that compliance is more helpful than maybe just cutting those expenditures. Don't forget that ultimately government also needs to spend to stimulate economic growth. And remember that we have transitioned a bit from maybe the pure fiscal consolidation. We are doing a little bit of expansionary, looking into 2020 election and all of that. So, but if you check over the years also, we tend to do this. So I personally don't think that excessive expenditure cuts will be more helpful to us.
Don't you think that in our quest to try and control the deficit as well, then we'll end up again expanding the envelope?
I'm thinking that they are looking at this estimate will still be done within the broader fiscal framework of the deficit that government is working with. Okay, so once we keep to that level of deficits, then I don't think that there will be a problem. The problem comes when we spend in excess of the projected and those unbudgeted expenditures. Those are the issues, because deficit itself is not that harmful. It becomes more harmful when you look at its persistence, its magnitude as a percentage of GDP, the source of the financing, the destination, and all of that.
Professor Bobkin has also been talking about how government should use this presentation to deal with revenue shortfalls.
One thing that I believe that the government will have to respond to strongly in the mid-year review is to look at the tax measures that they have put in place, because the revenue envelope has not responded the way we expect. And I think government will have to, the ministry would have to be much more stronger and perhaps be a little bit more realistic also in terms of admitting where we have gone wrong and where the potentials are for us to scale up. And more importantly, it's not just about talking about tax measures now. We have, what kind of sensitivity analysis have we done to indicate that these additional measures will bring in this amount of money or so? Because, look, our basic problem today, notwithstanding the expenditure inefficiency, which we can talk about, is the fact that we are not collecting sufficient tax revenue consistent with our tax potential, consistent even with our peers within the region.
For some analysts, this mid-year review could be described as a make or break for government in terms of dealing with those factors that poses as a major threat to stabilizing the economy.
Well, so let's break it down for you further. What do we understand by the mid-year review and supplementary budget? My colleague Philip Namfuri has our breakdown session today.
Hello, welcome to Joy Business Breaking It Down with me, Philip Namfuri, where we make complex topics simple and add a bit of funk to it. Now, I'm sure in the past few days you've heard about the mid-year budget review, and you're asking yourself, what does this all mean? Well, simply, the finance minister is mandated by law to come and tell us how government has performed over the course of the year, what they intend to do in the coming months, and what is going to change. Why? Because in November of the previous year, government normally presents the budget statement and economic policy. And this is in line with the 1992 Constitution. Government has to tell us where they are making our money from, asking where they are raising our money from, how they are going to spend our money, and what policies and programs they have in place to help you and I. Let me give you one example. Luxury vehicle taxes. Yes, it was put into the budget. Government wanted to raise more money from us and said any vehicle with an engine capacity of 3 liters and above has to attract this tax. So this is one way government raises revenue. So government is just looking to raise money, spend that money on us, and make sure that you and I have a better life. It sounds funny when government has to raise money from us and at the same time spend the money on us. But that's how it goes in the world of public finances. So you take money from the people and you spend on them. So that's what the budget essentially does. And I have in front of me, like I showed you, the 2019 budget statement. A stronger economy for jobs and prosperity. Now, the mid-year review seeks to do a number of things. One, government is going to review what has gone on since they presented the budget in November 2018. They're also going to give us updates on what we call macroeconomic targets, revenue and expenditure targets. Let me explain macroeconomic targets. Government projects that they want to grow the economy by this percentage or achieve an inflation target of this percentage. If in the course of the year events happen and government feels they cannot achieve this, they have to let you and I know through Parliament. Parliament is the people's representative. So government to come and tell the Parliament that, you know what, I could achieve this, I couldn't achieve this, so therefore I want to review this. Also, revenue and expenditure. How much government seeks to raise? How much do they seek to spend? If along the line government projects that they want to spend a bit more, they have to come to Parliament for what we call a supplementary budget. If they feel they need to raise more revenue from somewhere, they need Parliament's approval to do that. So that's why they'll come for the mid-year review. And the finance minister is mandated by law to do this before July 31st of every financial year. So we have a couple of days left to the end of this month, that's July. But I'm sure in the coming days, the finance minister will do this. So that's exactly what the mid-year budget review seeks to do. It emanates from the budget that was presented the year before. If there are changes to be made, the finance minister comes forward and tells us that we need to do this. And he tells Parliament, which is the people's representative, and they do all this to ensure that we have given them the approval to spend the money they raise from us. And they do so prudently and judiciously. So that's exactly what the mid-year budget review seeks to do. So keep your ears and eyes glued to Joy Business and the Joy Business reports, which we bring to you in the mornings, afternoons, and evenings, and you understand clearly what goes on when it comes to it. But just stay focused. And I want you to be concerned because anytime government is looking for money, they come to you and I. Anything they do on the bigger scale affects you and I. So keep your ears and eyes glued. And I'm sure in coming days, we'll explain more on what exactly this big and gargantuan document holds. This has been Joy Business Break It Down with me, Philip Nanfuri, and we looked at the mid-year budget review. Have a good one.
All right, you can always trust Philip to break it down for you. Let's turn to other news now. CEO of the Ghana Investment Promotion Center, Yofi Grant, says Ghana could become a center of attraction for major global brands as it hosts the Secretariat for the African Continental Free Trade Area. Mr. Grant has been explaining to Joy Business how Accra, as host of the Secretariat, will drive lots of investments into the country.
The main objective of the African Continental Free Trade Area are to create a single continental market for goods and services with free movement of business persons and investment, and eventually paving way for increased intra-Africa trade. Ghana was subsequently given the nod by heads of member states to host the Secretariat for the Continental Free Trade Area Agreement. CEO of the Ghana Investment Promotion explains that development will have great impact on the flow of investments into the country.
For us, even as an office, it's significant opportunity, job creation opportunity, because lots of people are going to be hired. It will require a lot of housing, it will require a lot of transportation, it will be requiring schools to educate the children of the people who work there, and also set Ghana as a hub for international offices in Africa, I believe. So you're going to have some of the agencies then start relocating their embassies, sorry, not the embassies, their headquarters, regional headquarters in Accra. Because it makes a lot of sense.
However, with the free movement of goods, concerns about dumping in less developed countries have been mentioned. But Mr. Grant assures there are standard rules and regulations to check the situation.
Because there are rules and regulations that are going to be at play. It doesn't mean that because you are one market, you can just throw things across the border any time you want. But the important thing is that you're increasing trade amongst the countries. And yes, I also do concede that as your economy becomes comparatively much better than other economies, then you become a victim of either economic migrants looking for jobs or adding value to it. But at the end of the day, what is more important is how we can create an environment, and the President has said clearly that Ghana should be the best place to do business. But we also do have laws, and immigration laws are pretty clear on that. And even with the CFT, the laws of engagement are clear. It's not just going to be an open-for-all field where anybody can do anything in each other's country. No, that's not.
The African Continental Free Trade Area will bring together all 55 member states of the African Union, covering a market of more than 1.2 billion people, including a growing middle class and a combined gross domestic product of more than $3.4 trillion. In terms of numbers of participating countries, the African Continental Free Trade Area will be the world's largest free trade area since the formation of the World Trade Organization.
And we'll stay a little longer on this because Ghana hosting the Secretariat of the Continental Free Trade Area is by no small measure going to impact significantly on the economy. Now, CEO of the Ghana Investment Promotion Center, Yofi Grant, you just heard, recently said the decision could increase inflows of foreign direct investments. My colleague Charles Aite has been looking at the selection of Ghana to host the Secretariat and its impact.
This month, the Executive Committee of the African Union accepted Ghana's bid to host the Secretariat of the African Continental Free Trade Area, and already reactions are flowing in on social media. With Nigeria being the largest economy in Africa, one would have thought the federal state would have been given the opportunity to host the Secretariat. Unfortunately, Nigeria lost out on the landmark opportunity. The agreement aims to, among other objectives, create a single market for goods and services and facilitate the free movement of people, capital, goods and services. Nigeria had earlier delayed signing the agreement, saying it needed to hold consultations with trade unions and local manufacturers. Already, Ghana is committing $10 million for the operationalization of the Secretariat. Here's Trade Minister Alan Tremontaine.
To make it operational, there's also the protocol on goods, which has also been negotiated and signed. That deals with rules of origin, tariff concessions, non-tariff barriers, phytosanitary measures. All those things have also been negotiated. So you have a protocol in goods, and again, you have a protocol in services. And this is very significant because even in the WTO, we've not been able to negotiate fully the protocol and services.
Hosting the Secretariat of the Continental Free Trade Agreement means a lot for Ghana's economic progress, especially when the agreement is set to be the world's largest free trade area since the formation of the World Trade Organization. It will cover a market of 1.2 billion people with a combined gross domestic product of $2.5 trillion. Even as Ghana hosts the Secretariat for the Continental Free Trade here, there are several concerns regarding dumping issues and even that of the rights to hosting. But amidst all these concerns, it is very clear as economists have praised the country for its sound economic policies that could sustain the rippling effects of the hosting of this Continental Free Trade Agreement Secretariat. Meanwhile, the GIPC has dispelled suggestions the agreement could result in dumping, saying appropriate standards and regulations exist to forestall such inconsistencies.
Let's turn to other news. Tonight, the Driver and Vehicle Licensing Authority, DVLA, has begun an operation to impound all commercial vehicles that fail to meet the standards set for public transport services. This enforcement is part of the authority's quest to ensure that roadworthy regulations are strictly adhered to. In an operation on the Spintex Road here in Accra, more than 20 commercial vehicles were impounded for violating the law. Here's Ebenezer Sabote's report.
The Driver and Vehicle Licensing Authority, DVLA, is currently enhancing efforts to make passengers and commuters of commercial vehicles comfortable by enforcing all regulations on standards. The National Task Force Coordinator at the DVLA, Joseph Clifford Obosu, explains to Joy Business the support of all stakeholders is needed to ensure that the law is strictly enforced.
Not that it is not roadworthy, but he does not comply to the road traffic regulations. You see, this type of car should take 19, but they've made it 23. You see the point now? We are not talking of the roadworthiness yet, but we are talking of the sitting arrangement and the number of persons that he should take.
Here are some drivers whose vehicles were impounded during the operations, denying knowledge of any such law.
I think you have a license for car, any roadworthy for car.
Roadworthy, I car and then 3 years mark of a car and minimum will be until Milan and what you can order car, mammy.
Okay. And yeah, Abanson saying then obey.
Make a boca when I'm on yeah,
okay. So what he's trying to say is that he has no idea about the number of people that are supposed to be in the vehicle. So he's now going to talk to his car owner.
Clifford Obosu, however, debunked the claim.
Oh, they know it intentionally because of maybe out of anger. Or they know it because I think almost all the branches in Greater Accra here, we have gone there. We are here to complete some. Kaswa areas and Medina, that area we have not covered it. But we have covered a lot of. And this is not the first time we are appearing in other media.
Some passengers encouraged the authority to go ahead with the enforcement in order to ensure their safety.
We don't feel comfortable at all because the seats, because of the seat, even I have a leg problem. One of the seats dropped back and it hit mine. So I have a problem with my leg now because of this car.
I heard the man say that when they come at first they conform, but later when they give them the license and they go to the magazines to now reconstruct the vehicles. I think if they can enforce and randomly select vehicles and seize their licenses and those things, I think it's very helpful. It's a very good exercise which will help all of us all.
It will be 70 centimeters, but now it is what? It's 55. It should be 70, but looking to this car, it's 55. So it's really inconvenient the passengers who normally board these cars.
Eben Sabote's report for Joy Business.
Interesting reports there. I guess we have to do the right things. Well, let's move on to other news stories. The cocoa processing company CPC has called on local commercial banks to support it with letters of credit. CPC believes support from banks will increase their capacity to purchase more cocoa beans for processing locally. Let's hear now from Chief Executive Nana Ejinim Boateng.
You know, the challenge, that's where Cocoa Board is coming again. Because of the syndication, we all are compelled to sell, and then we're left with what will not be able to suffice the industry players. So today, we just want to let the banks understand that they need to come and support in the form of credit facility so that they can then get a reciprocal value. Because if they support the local processors, that will mean that we'll not go into the syndication, and then Cocoa Board can also give their beans for us to process. So we'll illustrate it today to let them know and understand the benefits that they get. It's from 10 billion to 120. What it means that if you also invest locally by purchasing the beans from Cocoa Board, which will not let Cocoa Board do the syndication, then it will mean that you also have that range. And then you will do your economic benefits and then appreciate it and say, don't let us syndicate. We can also do it here, and it will then boost the local consumption and support government's activity.
Let's talk about football next. It's big business, and no other nation in Africa wants this more than Egypt. The North African nation has struggled to attract tourists over the last decades, primarily due to barred international press following attacks on popular tourist sites. The idea is that by the time the Africa Cup of Nations will be done, the value of the Egyptian pound will appreciate against foreign currencies. Egypt hopes to gain nearly $14 billion out of hosting the tournament. Joy Sports' Gary R. Smith is in Cairo, and has filed this report on how the football nation is cashing in on the AFCON tournament.
It's time for us to take stock of the African Cup of Nations as it goes into the business end for Joy Business. And joining me to do that is my good friend. Let him introduce himself.
Thank you, Gary.
Yes.
Hi, everybody. My name is Hani Hathout, Egyptian TV presenter from Egypt, yes. And we are on the Nile. Let's talk about what's happening here.
So, because this is his country, and he can't, there's no way I can know it better than he. Let him tell you about why Egypt needed this African Cup of Nations.
Yes, Egypt really needed this African Cup of Nations to be hosted here, because once Cameroon was stripped of the rights to host the AFCON, Sisi, the president himself, wanted the AFCON to be here. Why? To deliver many messages, like because Egypt, as you know, is now the head of the African Union. So he wanted to be hosting the AFCON in the same year, so he can deliver messages that now the relationship between Egypt and the other African nations are getting better and better. You know, as in the last period it wasn't very good. And also in security aspects, maybe, because in the last years not everything was going good, and the news outside Egypt about Egypt was not good. Like everything is Egypt is burning, and the news is very bad. So we wanted the African nations to be here in Egypt to see themselves how it's going on in Cairo and in other cities. So I think Egypt really needed this AFCON, and they are doing great in showing others what's happening. So we are enjoying having you here, and I think everything went good. Let's go to my friend, my other friend, Antoine, how are you?
Fine.
Okay, Anton has his own shop here on the Nile. Can you explain what are you doing exactly here?
Here I am selling this stuff. I'm selling this stuff from Egypt stuff.
Yes.
And all this stuff about pharaonic design.
Yes.
Stuff like that. You know.
Are you here because you know that African journalists and Africa and the AFCON is played here, or it's your?
No.
You are here always.
Every day here.
Yes.
We. I am owner for that. You know, and I.
Yeah. Are you enjoying?
Yes, I'm enjoying here from all these people who are from Ghana.
Yes.
Yes. I support Ghana.
You supported Ghana because Ghana already are kicked off.
Really?
Out, yes.
Out.
Tunisia beat them.
I don't know that.
It's okay. Nice to meet you. Thank you. Gary,
well,
I'm sorry I took your job.
No problem.
For 3 minutes.
No problem. I mean, I'm supposed to be here having fun. My Cameroonian friend says that I work too much, but he has the local knowledge, and this is why the AFCON is important for Egypt. Hopefully, you get a lot of money to help you back on track.
Inshallah, inshallah. Thank you, Gary.
And thank you too for Joy Business.
All right, so insight into Egypt's economy and why hosting the AFCON tournament was so important to them. That ending Business Live tonight. My name is Daryl Carl. Thanks for watching. More news, as always, on our website, joybusinessnews.com. We are back same time tomorrow. Thanks for watching Joy News.